what I want to do is make working in enrollment management attractive again. That's a hard proposition because we know that we've had one of the largest exodus in enrollment management within the last 10 to 15 years. And the challenge is that how do we make it competitive again? How do we make it sporty? How do we make it sexy so that folks aren't leaving enrollment management to take on other roles within the university? I want to be able to attract the best talent of those individuals who are thinking about coming to work in higher education.
Okay, that's your platform. I'm going to make you a not red hat that says "Make enrollment management great again."
I won't wear it. By the way, my color is blue, so.
Okay, yeah, I love that. That's going to be a blue ass hat then.
Blue ass hat. Yeah,
I love that. Hello, humans. This is Emily Smith. You're here for the Vine Down, the show where we get weird and candid about higher education and all of the things that are facing enrollment today. It's been a true delight lately, hasn't it, folks? Today, we are joined by Reggie Hill, who is the Vice Chancellor for Strategic Enrollment at the University of Missouri, St. Louis. And Reggie, you and I today are going to dive into kind of the art and science of recruiting students at a regional public, especially right now with a lot of crazy things happening. I want to chat with you today about this sort of area of specialization that you've created for yourself. Reggie Hill, thank you for being on the show.
Thank you, Emily.
Okay, Reggie, first question, and I almost never ask this of guests because typically I just want to jump into questions, but the context of who your institution is actually was sort of materially relevant to the topic at hand. So can you tell us a little bit about UMSL as a regional institution? Tell us a little bit about the brief of your institution before we dive into.
Yeah, University of Missouri St. Louis is one of four state schools within the University of Missouri system. The other schools are Mizzou, UMKC, and also Missouri S&T. We are the youngest of the four institutions, and so our history is only 61 years, and so I would say that we are a youthful, but also our history doesn't extend back over 100 years. So that poses some great opportunities, but also some challenges. We serve the city of St. Louis mostly. For much of our history, our students came from within 30 miles of campus. Historically, we served a large number of transfer students. And now the enrollment realities have changed. And so we have to rethink our enrollment models to continue to serve this region and this institution over the next 60 years.
Okay. Are you thinking of yourself as more of like we want to be Macy's, the store where you can get everything? Or are you thinking of yourself as like, we won't survive unless we specialize in the things that we offer and the ways that we recruit? Are you taking it in one direction or another?
Yeah, well, I think I'll flip it another way. I'll say that we have to think about ourselves as a public urban institution with 21st century consequence.
Ooh, say more about that.
Yeah, we have to be able to serve first-time in college students and create a residential program that attracts an array of students all over the country. We have to be an institution that serves our corporate partners and what we would consider corporate or adult learners. We have to stay true to who we were and serve a large number of transfer students who come from the vast community college system throughout the St. Louis region in Missouri. And then we also have an extensive professional education programs. And so I don't want to see us as just a residential college campus educating 18-year-olds, but I do want to attract a large number of students from that cohort. But I also just don't want to be a backpack campus or a commuter school either. So it creates a level of complexity for us to think about all those student groups in various ways.
Yeah, for sure. And how do you view your sort of the regionalness of your identity as a strength rather than a limitation?
Yeah, one of the things that we don't have to worry about, right? We don't have to worry about football. We don't have to worry about being considered some of the challenges as being a national brand. What we can focus on is access and opportunity for students across the country, across the region, and also international students. So when an institution can really focus on access, they can do some creative things in enrollment. Like some of the things that we're doing, I think we've been an innovator in direct admissions, one of the first institutions to really launch direct admissions and do it in a robust way. We can think about cool and creative ways that we can offer scholarship programs to our students. And so for me, there's not a lot of restriction being a regional public, but there's also historically being a limitation, you being confined to a region that's actually shrinking.
Yeah, and what's your perspective on you're talking about, like, wanting to create this national brand with national reach and yet still serving your local population. What's the balance of how you direct your team to spend their time, their efforts? How do you spend your money? Like, how do you balance both and?
Yeah, yeah. So one of it is deepening our relationship, growing deep roots in our local market. That's something that every institution should always think about. Because the reality is, if your local market isn't supporting you, when things get a little tight, no one will support you. So what we think about is that what does our backyard look like? And then we started to think about the 8 neighboring states around Missouri and building a solid foundation within key markets. The great thing about St. Louis is that there's arteries, whether it's by flight or by car, directly into St. Louis. If we want to talk about Little Rock, if we want to think about Memphis, if we want to think about Chicago. So our regionalism is a strength because of where St. Louis is situated on the Mississippi. We have direct access to students from Chicago, we have direct access to students from Memphis, Nashville, and also Little Rock.
Gotcha. Okay, so you really can I'm, like, picturing students coming to campus by, like, boat on the river. I like that.
Yeah, well, I don't know, maybe canoe or kayak. Yeah,
That'd be awesome. Okay, well, let's talk
I don't
about
know
those
about floating
community.
down the Mississippi though. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, we have enough danger in our lives right now. Um, Tell me about let's dig into the community relationships that you're keeping in terms of when you said that bit about, like if your local community is not supporting you and you're not supporting them, then the whole thing sort of breaks with your sort of localism. What relationships do you choose to build, maintain, and why? Because you're going to have to choose like this company, not that company. These community colleges, not those community colleges. These high schools, not those. What goes into the planning of who you're in relationship with?
Yeah. Yeah. I think you first have to think about your mission. I think, everything that we do is really tied to one, our mission and one, our strategic priorities. And so, I think, too often enrollment offices are disconnected to the institution's mission. So, one, our mission is simple. We transform lives. And then there's other priorities that we have as being a leader in workforce, and whether it's educating 18, 19, 20-year-olds and putting them out in the workforce, or whether it's educating corporate learners, adult learners who are working professionals. And so it makes it easy because, we don't have legacy partnerships. We're not a 150-year-old institution that has, a tradition of bringing students from the Northeast and throughout the Midwest and the West Coast. And those partnerships are harder to shift from. Everything that we're doing is relatively new, except our relationship with the community college. So it's an amazing and creative process for me to think about how to build an advanced enrollment management wing from scratch. Um, when I first got here, generally our relationships was just to our community colleges. 70% of our enrollment came from our community colleges. We know that that's not sustainable. We know that community college enrollment is declining across the country. And if you are attaching your enrollment strategy to community college enrollment, then you're also seeing enrollment declines on your campus. So we have to think about it. I think about it as an enrollment portfolio, and we have to diversify our portfolio to ensure enrollment sustainability for the next 60 years.
Yeah. So who are some of the entities in the community beyond the community colleges that you've built relationships and how do they function for you? And how do you maintain the relationships? Like I actually really want you to dive into literally how you maintain the relationships and who you as the enrollment leader have relationships with. Is it CEOs? Is it CBOs? And how do you keep track of and maintain those relationships?
I'll talk about it at multiple levels. So, one is the easy one. It's your relationship with school districts and independent high schools. And I think that's core to what we do and what we continue to do. It's our relationships with the community colleges and the academic leadership on those community colleges to ensure that we're continuing to serve those transfer students coming into our institution. And then it's our sponsorship and our commitment to the community-based organizations who are supporting access and opportunity for students who maybe come from disadvantaged communities. And so we spend a lot of time working with CBOs within our community. In our new partnership, which is within our Advanced Workforce Center, we're working with major Fortune 500 companies, mid-sized corporations within the St. Louis region, and even civic organizations providing educational opportunities to full-time employees through what we call our Advanced Workforce Center. With that, our tuition-funded model allows us to cover the cost of education to corporate learners if those corporations will match us with their tuition benefit.
Okay, so you've got like that give get established. Yeah, tell me about how that program came up. Is that a relatively new program?
It is a relatively new program. I wanted to do some of the things that Guild and To You and some of the other organizations, some of the organizations that you're seeing at Starbucks, Target, Walmart, where those learners can go to school for free. I wanted to build that type of model at a public regional institution, and we did it.
That's amazing. What do you think what were some of the unexpected challenges that you hit in standing up that program?
Internal operations. Public regional institutions are not that flexible. And so trying to figure out internal admission operations, financial aid, third-party billing, all those things, regional institutions and to some extent private schools are built to offer financial aid and student counts on a very traditional way. And so, that's been our biggest challenge. We've gotten huge praise from our corporate partners, but internally trying to figure out those internal operations and structures have been a little bit challenging for us. But we got great people here at UMSL who are embracing this process and trying to build our systems anew to meet those challenges.
Well, and I think implicit in that too is a creation of more of a yes culture. I would
Yes,
say, and
absolutely. Yes,
I,
and right.
yeah, well, right. Like
Yeah.
I had a guest recently, Keith Einstein in the last show called out to me just how colleges are not a monolith, right? When we talk about like the colleges, actually colleges are doing things independently of each other, and we should talk about that. And I think about the place that I most often see no culture is in regional publics because of because of two things. I think shared governance and employee retention, which is usually very good. That really drives a lot of like the processes of things. And when you ask, like essentially as a leader, you are saying, like, I need you to think about this process differently. Sure, this is how we structure student accounts and financial aid, but we actually need to turn this on the side or have this be the payer and not this entity. And implicit in what you just shared about sort of clearing up all of the dead wood around that strategy with that partnership, you must have really also created some yes culture within the institution.
And it's small wins, right? And you're absolutely right. Um, regional publics, often you see folks here for 20, 30 years, right? Yeah. And so, and those individuals who've been here for a long time, they've built those structures. So asking them to change it sometimes is challenging. The other thing is that regional publics had an amazing opportunity, I think, from the 1970 to roughly 2010. At the high point of college enrollment, they were inexpensive. You didn't have to do much marketing. You didn't have to have efficient admissions offices. You didn't have to have killer recruiters. You just opened your doors and students walked in. And so it was where innovation went to die. And the reality is that now we have to rethink those things And we have to ultimately build in our enrollment team an ad agency to be able to compete not only with the national publics, but also with the small and medium-sized private schools who, for much of their history over the last 20 years, have thought about new ways to recruit and enroll students and have done an amazing job doing it.
Yeah, but that awareness of, like, where you came from, which is, like, most regional publics were created in the 1970s to accommodate for baby boom, right? Like, those generation of students, right? And then we had these big surges of college-going population through Gen X to the millennial population, and now you're saying, like, yeah, now we need to get hungry with the drop-off. And you can, like, what are some of the lessons you can learn from the hunger of a neighboring, like, private or liberal arts school that you have adopted? And you've got these schools in your past too. Like, what are you bringing forward?
It is easier to it is easier to do it at a regional public if you can get around the old structures that exist within the institution and the old ways of doing it. Private institutions who had to innovate because tuition price, brand, etc., they're always going to be challenged by the inability to access a mass amount of students. But regional publics, if they can figure out more efficient ways, innovation technology, enrollment technology, think about new ways to admit students, the technology that admission counselors are using. Are you using AI, machine learning in the decision process? Are you using it in the recruitment process? Are you thinking about new ways to manage territories? All those things, many regional publics did not have in its arsenal and its toolkit. Now they're having to rethink those things. But the challenge is that sometimes the legacy structure still exists within the institution that makes it very difficult for them to move forward.
Okay, then how do you effectively become an agent of change
You break it down,
when you
you take it down to the studs and you rebuild the damn thing. Yeah.
Okay, what does it look like? Tell me more. Like, is that like firing people and starting with a new staff? Is that
No,
saying, like,
no,
blow up the process? Like,
no.
yeah, tell me.
No, I think ultimately it's leadership is convincing people that one, you want to win. It's also convincing them that there's another way of doing it. Oftentimes, when someone come into this environment, what ends up happening is that you end up becoming a part of the system rather than actually transforming the system. And I think you have to have one, confidence, two, being able to communicate up and communicate down, how you're looking to change this organization and why you're looking to change this organization. The reality is that I had to do a lot of time not only convincing my colleagues, but also convincing the campus community that things must change. We can no longer just be a transfer institution. We won't survive. A lot of it is actually, like you said, it's the art and science of it, but also showing evidence. I'll give you a perfect example. When I was talking about why we should go after our share of first-time in college students, why we should go after corporate partnerships, one of the things that I did show is I showed our enrollment trajectory over the last 15 years. But also I showed the enrollment trajectory over the last 15 years or enrollment projections over the last 15 years of community colleges. And then I made the argument is that because we have attached ourselves to community college enrollment, when community college enrollment went down, our enrollment went down too. Then how do we develop sustainable models for continuity? What we know about faculty is that they want to teach amazing students. And they want to see students in their classroom, and they want to see a new crop of students in their classroom every year. What we know about campus communities is that they care about their colleagues, and they don't want to see universities go through financial difficulties and challenges. So we enrollment managers have to find ways to solve the revenue challenges of the institution. The reality is the vast majority of our operating budget comes from tuition revenue. So it's our job to find new ways to enroll students into our vibrant institutions.
Yeah, that's really well said. And I appreciate like you actually shifted your language a little bit. You were like convincing, showing. And you unlocked on showing a lot because I think there are a bunch of lessons to learn. And I think, obviously, if you're trying to convince a campus community and other leadership of how to do something differently or that it's important to do something differently, you're going to have to do a lot of different moves, probably have a lot of different meetings, and probably maintain a lot of different sort of relationships and alliances in order to do that. Um, Going back to what you were talking about a little bit earlier on the workforce side, and I think I'm clear on what you might say about this, but I want to hear about your view of your relationships with community colleges because, in some respects, like a little bit of a competitor, a little bit of a feeder, um, and like in that sort of frenemy space, how do you sort of leverage those relationships for the positive?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. We talk about the business environment, and we have to see ourselves as a part of a larger ecosystem. And, can we change the language? Because language is how we see the world. And the reality is that I don't want to see myself as a competitor to a community college. I also, to some extent, don't want to see myself as a competitor to a neighboring institution. I think that we can all compete in a way that we're serving the entire community. And why don't we change the language from competition to collaboration to where we can all serve the larger ecosystem? The reality is that I know that St. Louis is shrinking. One of my roles is to try to figure out how to, one, keep more students within St. Louis, also, and bring new students into St. Louis. And this goes into the corporate conversation that you're having. We know that if our population starts to shrink and our potential skilled labor starts to leave, that corporations will leave. So one of the things that we're thinking about doing is that how do we import more students into our institutions? And regional publics have to think about this because they're used to recruiting students from a 30-mile radius. And if you live in the Midwest, if you live in the Northeast, if you live in most of the United States outside of the South, your populations are shrinking. So even as regional publics who have, we're smaller, but there's more of us. What we have to think about doing is how do we import more students from around a larger region, around a larger Midwest. Then what we have to think about doing is how do we sustain our students? How do we keep students within our city limits? The other thing is that then how do we actually create value within our corporate environment? So one of the things that we talk about is that we want to create value to our corporate partners by skilling, upskilling, reskilling their workforce. We also know that if we are to create a partnership where they go into an education program, they're more likely to retain that talent within their organization. They're more likely to grow that talent within our organization. So it's in our best interest that we help provide value to the entire ecosystem, not only bring in a new talent and new potential employees for those corporations, but also sustaining our workforce by keeping students within the region, and then also upskilling students within that corporate environment. Regional publics have to think about themselves as a key driver of workforce for the region.
Am I right in remembering that you were a history major? Is that
I
right?
am I am a history major. Absolutely.
Yeah.
I'm still a
You're
a student of
okay,
history.
okay.
I'm still a student of history.
Well,
Absolutely.
you're taking it into like you're giving sociologists right now. Like you're giving like definitely like a more of a sort of systems and urban planning and sort of the greater culture of your community. How do you think about how to manage the funding to do that, right? To get the right funding, especially, and I get that that's a very tricky question like today. How do you manage the funding to go do that? Because that's a different motion. Instead of looking at your 30 miles away population, you're looking at, your larger region. What's the shift there?
It's reprioritization of funds. It's not we're not getting any new money, right? It's really reprioritization of funds. We could talk about it at the micro level. Let's just talk about it at the divisional level. The reality is that our budgets aren't changing. They're not drastically going up. And you know, who work on the agency side, you know that. So we have to think about what's working, what's not working. And there's a strategic prioritization process that I take the entire division through so that we could get the chance to assess what's working, what's not working, and how is it aligned to our strategic recruitment plan for the upcoming year. And if those things don't align, how they don't get funded, because the strategy informs the budget and the budget pays for the strategy. And that's reality.
Wait. Say it again. Say it again.
The strategy informs the budget and the budget pays for the strategy.
I want to tattoo that on my face. That is amazing. Okay. How do you then, I've had a number of conversations because I'm asking schools all the time, right? Like my literal day job is to ask schools all the time to like, come with me on this innovation journey and like do something with AI. And some of the time I will get this answer from enrollment leaders to say like, yeah, we really want to do that. But in order to do that, I have to stop doing something else. And the stopping doing feels way too scary for me.
Right.
How do you then like lead through that? I mean, it sounds like you've got this determination of like, yeah, should we keep doing this? What's your perspective on that?
Yeah. So it's getting people in a room, outlining your goals, outlining your objectives, outlining how they're going to execute on them, and then determining whether that fits within the overall strategic enrollment plan. And if some of those things do not move the needle, then get rid of it. It's that simple. But most of us in higher education enrollment management are tied to our legacy partners and legacy partnerships. But do we assess those partnerships every year? Do we determine whether they actually are working for us? Right? And so I think the fear is if I do something different, then the outcome is going to be worse. Well, it's already bad.
Yes.
It's already bad. Let's figure it out, right?
But like just like saying like there's opportunity in not having football, you're actually saying like there's opportunity in things already being bad. Like it's actually gives you some freedom to then just do what you want. Okay, I'm with you.
100%. Absolutely.
All right. So that's a really good perspective on vendor relationships and also the way that you spend your team's time and effort. Do you involve your entire team in that discussion? Your enrollment leadership group? Like what does that look like?
At least the leadership team, yeah, absolutely. 100%. You know, I got a request for, we should be doing this. And it was, I'll say it was virtual tours. And I said, our virtual tools are still relevant. Well, and maybe they are, but I want them to justify it.
To think through the why, to get down to the,
100%. Show me the evidence and show me how it's going to move the needle.
Mm-hmm.
And if not, it's hard for us to fund it.
Well, it makes the behaviors really easy. Like it makes then the actions really feel easy if you're really orienting around like the why and the strategy. It's like, oh yeah, okay, that's simple. We don't have to keep doing that, or we do have to start doing this other thing.
But then they become invested in the process.
For sure.
Too often, and you may know this, like enrollment VPs and vice chancellors didn't train the next generation of enrollment leaders. Is kind of why we're in this whole debacle in enrollment management. Why there's a huge gap in the skill.
Thing right now. You are saying an unsaid thing right now. Keep going.
It's true. It's true because 15, 20 years ago, what we did is says, as long as we know all the information, I can stay in this role, right? And that's a failure in leadership. Our role is to ensure continuity and sustainability of enrollment. So why not train your director, your assistant director, introduce them to the vendor relationships and how the process works, get them involved in the search strategy, get them involved in enrollment technology, but ultimately get them involved in the decision-making processes within enrollment management. Even your assistant directors, even your coordinators should be involved in the process. What I want to do is make working in enrollment management attractive again. That's a hard proposition because we know that we've had one of the largest exodus in enrollment management within the last 10 to 15 years. And the challenge is that how do we make it competitive again? How do we make it, sporty? How do we make it sexy so that folks aren't leaving enrollment management to take on other roles within the university? I want to be able to attract the best talent of those individuals who are thinking about coming to work in higher education.
Okay, that's your platform. I'm gonna make you a not red hat that says "Make enrollment management great again."
I won't wear it. How about that? By the way, my color is blue, so
Okay, yeah, I love that. That's gonna be a
yeah,
blue ass hat then.
blue ass hat. Yeah,
I love
absolutely.
that. Okay, that is such a good perspective on bringing your team along and being able to bring up the next crew of enrollment leaders, especially at a regional public. Are you thinking about the ways in which your team, your staff, your brand, your recruiting of students competes with larger institutions? Or are you going to say a very Reggie thing, which is like, no, the larger institutions make us better, and here's how I view it as a lever?
I mean, great evaluating great companies should make you better. You know, I don't, I don't get when
Like, are you looking
you
into
hear,
Mizzou going like, what are you doing that I'm not? I should
what are
get
you doing
savvier in
that
this
I'm
way?
not doing?
Okay.
Or, so I'll go back to this. I had a president that said to me one time, he's like, and it was when I was working at a Catholic institution. He said, Reggie, um, we can't be Notre Dame, we can't be Catholic University, but we can build our own ladder. We can build our own house, and I think that's important. I think it's always important to look at best practices in industries and who's doing amazing things, and respect that hustle without getting it to the point that we're better than them. Sometimes we are, sometimes we're not, right? But I think the goal is for us to play the long game and try to figure out how to differentiate ourselves in the market and how to be the best version of ourselves without diminishing the contributions of other institutions. I think that's important. And again, it goes back to, we're all in our ecosystem. I think this is, higher education is what has sustained our country and our democracy. And I think it's important that we find value into how to keep the enterprise alive. So it's not getting rid of other institutions. It's not diminishing other institutions. It's how do you exist in an environment alongside those institutions is important to me.
Yeah, I think about that a lot, and actually, that's like the thing that keeps me up at night as colleges close. We just had news of another one this week in the Upper Midwest, and I I think about how colleges are really good for Earth, really good for America. I mean, you think about that in it's sort of what you were saying before about the like if we keep skilled labor here, it keeps companies here and makes St. Louis better, but like it makes America better. I think it's really critical.
Well, I'll say no. I'll say this: no 18-year-old is ready to go out there and ultimately get a job, get an apartment, get a car, start paying bills. I think the beauty about college is that it puts young adults into a container and let them figure it out for 4 years. Let them critically think about the world around them. Let them critically think about how to solve the world's most pressing problems.
Yeah, I needed to be in that container. Yeah, like
100%.
yeah, I mean, I had a very like went directly to college from high school, spent 4 years there, graduated in 4 years. But like I desperately needed that container at that time in my life. I'm totally with you. Um, okay, well, what keeps you up at night about the future
Nothing.
of regional public?
Nothing. I
Can't
get
you
up too
haven't figured
early.
it out?
I
Okay,
get
like
up
why
too
do you wake
early
up in the morning?
to get
What gets
after
you
it.
up in the morning?
To get after it. This thing that we love, and this thing that we love, which is education. That's what gets me up in the morning.
Okay, so you're really rolling at me with like no fear. You're like, I am good. I'm
No,
no.
no, no. And the reality is that everything changes, Emily,
You're
and
telling
that
me, Reggie.
our willingness to adapt to change is either going to force us get excited about this new process, or it's going to keep us in fear. I
Okay.
remember that as bad as COVID was, that I was excited that we would get an opportunity to navigate a new reality. And I had hoped that higher education found a way to make itself better. Too often, we reverted back to old practices.
Just because they were the well-beaten path, and it's easier to go back to the well-beaten path and forge your way through tall grass and step over sticks.
It was comfort. It was
Yeah,
comfort. You
sure.
know, I often said that higher education's role is to teach young minds how to solve the world's most pressing problems. And what we did is that we didn't transform our institutions into think tanks about how to solve the world's most pressing problem. We tried to figure out how to go away and then when we came back, we tried to figure out how to bring back what was prior to COVID-19.
Right, how to recreate what we were in. Yeah, sure.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay, so here's your history major question as our final question. What A lot is happening right now, and whether you're a regional public, a flagship public, a private institution, there are so many things happening. Is there another time in history, whether it's sort of the recent history of enrollment management or Earth's history, that you are thinking about and calling upon as a history major? Like, are you thinking about any other times in history and learning from other times in history?
No. Oh, am I learning from other times in history? Oh man, there's you know I'm always thinking about history, Emily. Um, I think about Santo Domingue and the Haitian Revolution, and I think about those things and uh, the creation of a world anew and how it sparked democratic revolutions throughout this hemisphere. I think about uh, the long arc of freedom struggles throughout the United States and how it's ultimately expanded our democratic franchise. But I'm thinking about the future and I'm hopeful. I'm very hopeful of the future. I think that at this point in world history, I think it's the most safe. It's still one of the most safest times in our world. But I also think that some of the challenges that we may be facing right now is a reaction to things actually changing for the good.
Okay. I like the freedom in that statement, and I will join you on that invitation. I could get my mindset around that.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I can refresh my optimism with that lens. I
Because
like that.
because anytime you have huge transformation, you're always going to have a reaction to it.
Okay, that wasn't the last question. I totally lied. This is the last question. You are a great reader of books. What is a book that you would pull off of your vast bookshelf in this chapter of enrollment management that you would share with colleagues?
Oh, what book would I pull
And
off?
you could say, like, I'm pulling this out because this would be like delightful on a gloomy night, or you could say, I think this book is really relevant. Like, it could be anything. Total freedom.
The challenge is once you're a book collector and a reader,
You have
y-
a billion books.
yeah, yeah, you found all the great books, and so um, gosh, um, I will tell you, and I'll say one that's a little bit cliche,
I love a cliche. We love a cliche.
Jim Collins' Good to Great, right? And
Mhm.
and and Collins talk about the flywheel concept, and I tell um, enrollment leaders all the time is that figure play the long game and figure out how to create momentum. You're never going to have quick wins. It's all about building a system that's built to last. And think about how to build a system that is interconnected, that's relying on each other, um, And then, a great book in history. I'll just St. Louis. So, Walter Johnson is one of the great historians, and he wrote an amazing book called The Broken Heart of America. And it's about the history of St. Louis. But one of my favorite works from Walter Johnson is Soul by Soul, Life Inside the Antebellum Slave Market. Is an amazing work. So if anybody is interested in reading the history of New Orleans during a certain time period, read Walter Johnson's Soul by Soul.
That is awesome. A book recommendation from Reggie Hill is never a bad one, folks. Take it seriously. And Reggie, I love how you're bringing that like higher order systems thinking as your primary mode. Like that's been very clear to me actually in the rest of the things you've talked about in the show is that higher order systems thinking is actually what you favor beyond first order thinking, which are reactions. And that's actually really, really important when dealing with like novel or complex situations that like first order response is often inaccurate, even though they might feel really emotionally satisfying. And in those second, third, fourth order effects and that higher level sort of systems thinking is really right on.
Yeah. And really systems thinking, it really, doubles down on disruption. But I'll add a layer to it. And, Chamberlain wrote an amazing book called The Congruence Framework. And he talked about from a systems approach, how you have harmonious disruption or how do you create harmony within the system. And I think some of us come in and we want to rip it apart and rebuild it. But my question to all enrollment leaders is, how do we create harmony to achieve our enrollment outcomes?
Yeah, I like that. It makes things feel possible.
Yes. And all things are. And all things are.
Okay, all
And
right.
all things are. And all
Tattoo
things
that
are.
on my face too.
Yeah.
Well, humans, we'll see you next week with my brand new face tattoos. And humans, take care of yourself. Reggie, be well. Thanks very much for joining us on the show.
Thank you so much, Emily.